Welcome on into BKL Nightly. This is the Let's Talk Ball edition. I am Thad Brown. He is Carl Jones. Every single week, we break down the X's and the O's from every single Bills game. Today, we're watching the Bills and the Panthers. Very one-sided, Carl, for a number of different reasons. The Bills get some credit for that for sure. But as we will discuss, the Panthers had more than a significant helping of unforced error to contribute to this game that helped out the Bills. Let's start on the offensive side of the ball. And the number one story for the Bills coming out of this game was James Cook, his 216 yards, and the way this offense just utterly dominated in the ground game. And as much as James Cook deserves the credit, the O-line for sure gets a piece. But let's start with Joe Brady, because the Bills ran a lot of sweep, a lot of toss, and boy, it worked over and over and over.
If I were to tell you the best players on the Panthers, you would probably most notably say J.C. Horn, but he doesn't matter in the run game. Outside of J.C. Horn, Derrick Brown, big boy in the middle. He's going to probably be a Pro Bowler at some point in his career, maybe even an All-Pro. So I think it's fairly smart to say, you know what? He's really good. Let's avoid him and get on the perimeter and take advantage of these much smaller edge defenders. I know the Panthers have infused a lot of resources at edge, but they're smaller guys. I think of Nick Scorton from A&M, the rookie, as well. He's not the biggest guy out there. He's not Greg Rousseau. So I think it's good on Joe Brady to get on the perimeter a little bit and take advantage of where the Panthers are lacking a little bit.
I think Nick Scorton actually had a decent amount of fight. I was impressed with the battle he showed, even though you're right, he was undersized. The other thing, too, on the edge, and we're going to talk a little bit more about Tyrell Shavers, but with some of those guys that are out there, the Bills have good blocking receivers. So if you want to go our receivers and tight ends and fullback against your corners and, weak side linebackers, that in a lot of cases is going to be advantage Buffalo. The other thing that stood out to me, two things actually. Number one, the Panthers are more of a two-gap defensive tackle style. So that means they're not getting upfield immediately. They're more sit back and trying to occupy two spaces. Well, when you do that, it allows the offensive lineman an opportunity to get outside and to hook guys to create space for those outside runs. The other part of this for the Bills is that they were able to create space very, very easily and produce a run game that I think was simple to understand and certainly, a little bit out of the box for the Bills to be able to go outside as much as they did. Let's get into some of the individual players, because you and I both have different guys we want to spotlight that are not on the offensive line. The offensive line was good, but other guys who were a part of creating this run game space for the Bills.
Reggie Gilliam is a hoss. I think of that long 64-yard touchdown in the first half where he's pulling a little bit, and he meets that guy in the gap, and boom, says, "Excuse me, and let me escort you over here." A few gaps to the left. James Cook is coming behind me. He has reservations for 6. He had a couple plays that weren't always explosive plays where you're like, man, he's really a nail in the run game. A hammer in the run game, making the Panthers a nail. Love to see that. And then also Jackson Hawes. I know we talked a lot about him in the first month of the season. I think he has passed a novelty at this point. He is a very important key cog in the machine of the Bills' run game. There aren't many tight ends that you trust to take defensive ends head up. There aren't many that you ask to do this in the National Football League. And the Bills ask of that at Jackson Hawes a few times a game. And this running game flows, not just because of scheme, not just because of James Cook and the O-line. You need the ancillary pieces around them to pitch in and do their part as well.
Tyrell Shavers is the guy that I want to talk about. He is, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, become that wide receiver blocker the Bills seem to always have. It was Matt Collins last year. Before that, it was Gabe Davis. Jake Kumeros had a turn with that. They always have somebody, it seems, who would be able to fill that role, that you can be a receiver, but you can also be a weapon as a blocker. And going into the season, I think we talked about it a little bit, I wasn't sure the Bills had that guy. I thought maybe Keon Coleman could be it. He certainly has the body to be that big blocker, but Shavers has clearly stepped up. His snap counts have gone up because of it, 28, 25 snaps the last 2 weeks, his highest 2 totals of the year. And on that play, and you're right, Reggie Gilliam has one of the better pulling clear out blocks you'll ever see on a linebacker. But the reason that thing scores is because Tyrell Shavers is downfield with the safety in his back pocket for the entirety of the play. And it wasn't the only time he did that. He has just been such a hard worker, such a clean blocker too. He does a lot of things technically right. Not all the time, but I'm very excited to see where he's at as a blocker, because this is brand new for him. It's not like he's been doing this for year over year over year. This is the first chance he's had to be able to be a part of this offensive philosophy, and so far it's been a resounding success. The last thing that I want to talk about with the run game, and I want to throw this at you for a second too, The Bills were pretty successful out of 11 personnel running. You talk about the big run plays in this game. They had, I counted 9 out of 11, 7 out of 21 or 22 or something heavier. By spacing the Panthers out, the Bills, it seemed like at the snap, had a number of runs where you just count 1, 2, 3, 4. There were 7 blockers against 6 players for Carolina in the box. When you're playing 11 personnel, even if it wasn't spread out, as a defensive group or a defensive game plan, it kind of mystified me why the Panthers would go as far spread out as they would against an offense like the Bills that doesn't have a ton of downfield threats. It's not like you got to worry about someone blowing by you 30 yards when you know the number one game, the number one tool for this offense is running the ball. And yet the Panthers started in so many soft, deep, wide formations. It made any run good. I mean, the pitch was the right call, but Carl, it felt like to me the Bills could have ran the ball all day long on this.
Yeah, the Panthers were just very conservative in how they approached this game. I mean, all the wide receiver screens that they were giving up, with the DBs 8, 9 yards off the ball. Even the nickels weren't necessarily playing over the apex alignment where they could make us play on those screens. They just played it like they were more so scared about the explosive play of Josh Allen. And at this point in this iteration of the Bills, I don't know if that's how a DC should approach things. So good on the Buffalo Bills for saying, you know what? If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
This will not be the last time we question what the Panthers were doing in this contest. But let's talk about that passing game for the Bills, because it was a little bit of a hot button topic afterward, not only after the game, but on Monday when the coaches and coordinators met with the media. Where do you want to start when it comes to what's wrong with this passing game? And I think maybe more to the point, how wrong do you think it is at this point?
I think it's broken. I truly do think it is. Ring the alarms and any verbiage that you want to use in terms of Super Bowl aspirations. And I think that's the one thing that I want to make abundantly clear every single time that we get on this program. I'm not talking about the Bills as if they're a wild card team. I'm not talking about them like they're the Cleveland Browns. This is a team that wants to raise a Lombardi trophy come February, and therefore the standards are higher, especially when you have 17 at quarterback. The first half of this game, the Bills did not complete a single pass past the line of scrimmage to a wide receiver. Not one. All of Khalil Shakir's catches were screen balls, and then every single completed pass was to a tight end. That is not sustainable, and you can't do that down in and down out against some of the better teams in the NFL. You think Steve Spagnuolo's not going to key in on that? You don't think the Denver Broncos and what they have going on, or what about Lou Anarumo and the great things that he's doing out there in Indianapolis? They have to get more production from the receiver position, and I think it's all parties involved that have to play better. Josh Allen's missing throws. Receivers aren't getting open. Joe Brady doesn't trust these guys to clearly go down the field because of all of these short dink and dump routes. They completed before this game got out of hand in the fourth. Well, this game was always out of hand, but until the fourth quarter, they didn't complete a single pass with the air yards more than 8 yards to a wide receiver. That can't continue to happen. If this was one thing, I get it. This has been a month now. Teams are keying in on this, and I don't know how do you fix this in terms of what player you bring in, but they have to figure out a way to fix this passing game, because it's an injustice to Josh Allen and all the great things that he can bring to your team, and basically neuter him in a way to make him a quarterback that's Dylan Gabriel. It can't be like this.
And even you talk about no passes downfield to receivers, even the downfield passes to the tight ends, which is why you have to make that caveat of the receivers. I think 2 of the 3 of them were scramble plays. The Jackson Haas one on the goal line is a scramble play. The Dawson Knox one near the goal line is a scramble play. Only the Dalton Kincaid 23-yarder in the first quarter, which was a nice offensive play, really the only in-structure deep pass the Bills threw all day long in a part of the game that mattered, was the only thing that happened. And to your point about how many other pieces are kind of getting infected by what's, I think, wrong down the field. And that's the way, you tell me if I'm wrong about this, but I think there's not enough talent down the field to open things up. And what's happening now is that the quarterback, understanding that, is now earlier and earlier giving up on what was in structure passing plays. Josh Allen multiple times in this game escaped from a pocket where there wasn't any pressure. To me, it feels like he's looking downfield and thinking, I'm losing there, I'm losing there, I'm losing there. Let me roll out somewhere and try and make something happen. That's why he's taking 16-yard sacks, in my opinion. Now, there were parts of this where Josh Allen just flat out missed throws. There's a throw to Elijah Moore on the sideline where your $250 million quarterback, he's got to make that one. But regardless, while there are other things that are wrong with this offense and this passing game, to me it all stems, and you talked about a little bit, with there not being enough receivers, or at least receiving talent down the field.
Especially down the field, I want to make that clear, because I do think that in the intermediate and even where Khalil Shakir likes to succeed at the line of scrimmage part of the game. I think they're okay. But when you play the Chiefs, I think about to the Chiefs in that postseason game, how they really were boa constrictors and how they basically said, we dare you to beat you over the top. I know Mac Hollins caught that pass over Trip McDuffie, and that was a beautiful play. How often do you see receivers running scot-free like that with no help that late into the postseason? It doesn't happen, and that was a type of lack of respect that they showed Mac Hollins and the Bills receivers at that point, and I think they're going to do the same exact thing. Maybe not this Sunday because Steve Spagnuolo is weird in how he approaches postseasons versus regular season. But when these games start to matter later in the year, that's how teams are going to approach this Bills offense.
I didn't like some of the route combos in this game. There was a 13 personnel play late in the game where it looked like Joe Brady pretty much called for all three tight ends of the line to run next to each other 5 yards apart over the middle of the field. That didn't help. So there's a lot of schematic things that are going on, and maybe not a lot, but a chunk of it is that as well. And you almost feel like that Brady, when he understands that he can't win, he's got anything that he wants to do in the passing game to create wins, he has to create them. He can't just say, my guy is better than your guy. You talk about the boa constrictor thing. It does feel like everything is so not loose, not free, not easy, that everybody is squeezing hard to make this happen. And Carl, we're talking about this in a game where the Bills won 40-9, where they should be able to do whatever the heck they want to on offense because the ground game was going so well. I'm with you on the alarms. Real quick, what's your suggestion? What do the Bills do? I mean, I think we all agree it's going to have to be new talent. You talked before we started recording here, maybe Josh Palmer is a little bit of a release valve, but I think we both probably agree it's got to be a trade, right?
It has to be some trade, and I think Rashid Shaheed is probably the most realistic candidate, and who knows what the asking price would be for that. You're seeing conflicting reports, but I will feel comfortable giving up a 3 or a 4 to go get that done. I think as long as you got Josh Allen, you owe it to him to always make sure that you give him the best chance to succeed. I want to put a number real quick from Next Gen Stats on what we're talking about. Passes of more than 10 or more yards. So this isn't like shots down the field like Drake May's doing right now. Josh Allen is 22nd in EPA per dropback. 10 or more yards. That includes some tight ends. Throw Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox in there too. 10 or more yards. He is 22nd in EPA per dropback. Air yards. He is behind quarterbacks like Carson Wentz, Kyler Murray, Mac Jones, and your boy from South Beach, Tua Tagovailoa. That is unacceptable, and that can't continue on if the Bills want to raise the Lombardi Trophy in February.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. That's like Gardner Minshew as your quarterback on throws of 10 yards or further right now. The Bills just can't manage with this. The thing about Shaheed, I don't know if I give a 3 for him. I mean, the Bills need help desperately, and maybe you pay a desperate price. But Shaheed is just not that much of a talent. He fits well because at least he would provide that down the field aspect that might create some breathing room for everybody else. But a third is still pretty rich for my blood when it comes to a guy like Rashid Shaheed, who's been a part-time player on a bad offense in New Orleans.
For sure.
All right, let's go to the defensive side of the ball. Number one, you're the cornerback. You're the former Division I. We had a corner who played his first ever game as a first-rounder, Max Hairston. Give me your breakdown on the 27 snaps that Hairston had against the Panthers.
I thought first off, most importantly, he looked healthy. Didn't look like he was limited by any means out there. He was very fluid, and he just is an easy mover out there, which I think if you were excited about him in the draft and you wanted to see that athleticism translate to the football field, at least in his first audition, I thought that you saw those same traits. Having said that, he never looked like he had to move into top gear. That's one of two things. Either A, the receivers across from him weren't that good, and he didn't feel like he needed to extend a little bit, or he's that natural of an athlete where he can pace it on his own. I don't know which one is which. I think we're going to find out this Sunday when he's facing a receiving core that can get into that 4th, 5th gear a little bit. But I was encouraged. I'm not going to sit up here and say that it was lights out, oh my gosh, like the greatest thing I've ever seen, calling Pastor Surtain. But I thought that he didn't really have any coverage bust in terms of like in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's good, especially when he's been away from that long. But he looked like an easy mover, and that's what I wanted to see. I want to see that same athleticism I saw at Kentucky translate to Sundays, and at least through 27 snaps, I think is going to be there.
I agree. I thought he looked comfortable. I thought he looked like he was in the right place most of the time. Even that one, give me your take on this play. It was, I think, right at the end of the half, the play where Andy Dalton gets sacked and the Panthers end up not getting a field goal. The Bills go man in low red zone, and Hairston ends up not on a man. He's kind of standing out there by himself, and I think it's unusual that the safety got a man and the corner did not. But even then, I thought he felt comfortable enough to understand, okay, I have space. Who's around me? Let me try and get in some passing lanes. I thought it was, handled about the right way. Yes?
Yes, I was the same way. I was like, why is Poyer guarding? And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, this isn't like a huge bust because Harrison doesn't look out of place. That was a good move by the young buck.
The other thing about the receivers he went against, which is definitely a point I thought about going into the last game and certainly going into this one, that Carolina team is big, strong, tall receivers, which probably is not the ideal matchup for smaller, faster Max Hairston. This week you think would be with Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and that group. So in terms of not being able to go into the top gear, I think Tet McMillan and Xavier Legette, those aren't guys that are going to bring the top gear out of most players, whereas this week will. The other concern I had with him is being able to take on blocks. Look, he showed the ability to tackle on the outside throw to Jalen Coker there, but there were a couple of times where Xavier Legette locked him up. There was one play where Xavier Legette locked him up, and Max immediately went to the ref looking for a holding call, and I'm kind of watching it, laughing to myself, thinking, no. That's a good block there, son. Welcome to the NFL. That's how we
been there, done that. Hey, I've been there, done that one.
Right. So, as a smaller guy, this is probably something he's going to have to deal with. And there was another run where I didn't think he got physical enough, but we're nitpicking because all we have are 27 reps to go on. The overall, I thought, was pretty darn solid. When it comes to the Bills and the other major part of this game, in terms of the story, it was the 7 sacks from the defensive line. And there were a number of players who got involved in this. But let's first start on the other side with the Panthers' offensive line, which came into this game 23rd in quarterback pressure rate allowed. I talked about it before the game last week that, look, Bryce Young's probably been saving this line with his ability to scramble. Andy Dalton, he doesn't have an ability to scramble. He showed the ability to turtle, is what he showed. And it did play into the Bills' hands. But this Panthers offense, especially on the line, certainly, I think, lived down to the hype in this one.
We're going to find out soon. And I know the Chiefs are somewhat banged up, but I think they'll get Trey Smith back for Sunday. We're going to find out real soon. Was this more of a quarterback ecosystem, the Panthers issue, and that's why the Bills' defensive line looks so good? Think back to week 2 when they played the Jets. They dominated that offensive line in Justin Fields, and it was more so, well, I don't think Fields can get rid of the ball that well, and the offensive line didn't have a great day. Or is this something that we're going to see going forward when you infuse Michael Hoyt, Joey Bosa looked like he had a few splash plays as well. Greg Rousseau turned the corner a few times. I don't know which is which, but I will say on that given Sunday, they look fresh. They got after the quarterback. Andy Dalton did fall. Like, I think the one play right before half, like he felt Bosa and just said, I give up, which was kind of wild. But nonetheless, you can only play who's in front of you, and I thought that they dominated, which is what good teams are supposed to do when a team is in a weight class below you.
Yeah, and they were schemed up and coached like a team that's in the weight class below you, maybe 2 weight classes below you. I mean, they had one play where I know they're trying to simulate a run, and you want to show pulling action on the offensive line to get a defense thinking run. But what ended up happening on this particular play is they tried to pull the center and run the tight end to the inside to pick up the center's man, and they just ran into each other. And basically, instead of blocking the guys that would have been in front of the tight end in the center, those 2 guys got in scot-free. And this was, kind of the play that was the thing that summed up what the Panthers' offensive line looked like. As for the Bills on the D-line, let's talk a little bit more about Joey Bosa, because with the loss of Ed Oliver, and we'll get into that in a second too, to me, Joey Bosa is the guy that needs to step up. This is the guy that's going to have the pressure. This is going to be the guy that's going to kind of have the crown of, look, if we're going to be the kind of defensive line that, like you said earlier, can compete for a Super Bowl, we need someone to be a star. He's been close to that a lot of times this year. He's been close to that level, and he was late in second quarter. I thought he was fantastic over and over and over. Can we get that Bosa that often or often enough to make up for what the Bills are going to lose in Ed Oliver?
That's going to be the million-dollar question. We've talked about this off air, on air for years at this point. The Bills need a player in the postseason that has 2 things. I need at least 5 or 6 pressures a game when it counts. And then I also need for the offensive line and the protection plan to account for you every single time they break the huddle. And based off of, I think, 3 or 4 games, we've seen Joey Bosa be that caliber of player where, like, hey, if you leave him one-on-one with a tackle that's less than, he's going to completely blow up this play. If he can continue on this, I don't want to say trajectory because he is what he is at this point in his career, but if he can have those performances when they need it most, that's where they're going to make up for the lack of Ed Oliver, because that is a big loss.
The thing that has concerned me with Joey Bosa and Greg Rousseau to a lesser extent is that what they do well is compress the pocket, push offensive tackles into the quarterback's lap, and make life a phone booth in there. The problem is, while that probably would have worked 20 years ago when you had a number of, statuesque quarterbacks, the Drew Bledsoes of the world, who were dominating the NFL, now, as the Bills tell us all the time, everybody can scramble at quarterback. Everybody can move. So while, yes, that is creating pressure. Yes, that is getting a quarterback off his spot. I just watched Pat Mahomes last night be off his spot for most of the night against Washington. Didn't seem to bother him too much. So can those guys escape from blocks and release enough to actually make a quarterback tackle? It's not about quarterback pressures with the Bills. To me, it's about quarterback tackles. And, to your point, those are the things the Bills are going to need to get. Yes, 5 to 6 pressures at the beginning, but you've got to be able to release from those pressures, because otherwise you're just going to be obstacles. And yeah, those things are a pain in the neck for a quarterback, but the elite guys you're going to see, whether it's Mahomes or if Baltimore figures things out and it's Lamar Jackson, those are things those guys can just flat out get around the way football is played here in 2025.
Every quarterback stats drop when they're pressured. However, Andy Dalton's plummets. Patrick Mahomes takes a slight dip down. That's the difference that you're talking about. That it's a huge difference that you see every January.
Speaking of huge difference, no Ed Oliver, likely for the season. Maybe not. Maybe he comes back for the Super Bowl or the AFC Championship. And, I remember noting in my notes here that the last 2 or 3 plays that he had, maybe for the year, were 2 or 3 of his better ones this year. He was playing at that Avengers level that we bestowed upon him a couple years ago in terms of what he was able to do play after play after play. Can you describe, and I know you can't, but I'm going to make you try, what the impact of Ed Oliver not being a part of this defensive line will mean?
Massive, especially on first and second down. A lot of times when we talk about these guys getting after the quarterback, oh, it's third down, get them off the field. I thought that Ed Oliver, some of his best plays this year, he was super active on the early downs where it's not as easy to get after the quarterback. And I'm not saying it's ever easy to get after the quarterback, but it's much easier on 3rd and 9. Ed Oliver, some of his best plays this year were 1st and 10 or 2nd and 7, where he's shooting through gaps and getting a big stop for a TFL, or he is getting a quarterback off his spot and forcing him to either check it down or throw the ball away. That's the part that they're going to miss a ton. Will they be able to finagle some things on 3rd down, move Michael Hoyt inside and do some funky stuff with that? Sure. But the early down success that Ed Oliver provided when he was out there this year is going to be huge. And you're going to need Deion Walker to get thrown into the deep end, and hopefully he can grow up really fast, because he also has provided some of that early down success as well. Problem is that we've talked about on this program, he will give up a 40-yard run being in the wrong gap as well. So it's big, and they're going to need those young pups to grow up real fast.
Ed Oliver's fight when it comes to facing a double team on a 1st and 10 run, that was the play he got hurt on. He got doubled. He got inside of it. He was able to, get involved in the stop. That's something that he does as well as he does rush the passer. And you're right, because when it comes to rushing the passer, not only do the Bills have Joey Bosa and Greg Rousseau, who are 2 highly paid and at least have the talent to be impact players there, but you can run a linebacker from somewhere. You can create things to create pressure. When it comes to stopping the run, for the most part, your guys up front just got to win. And Ed Oliver is the only one who consistently wins against double teams all the time. And, the Bills, not only are they short bodies, but they're short upper level bodies to be able to stop against the run. And we talked earlier about what Brandon Beane might want to do at the trade deadline with gathering a receiver. They're going to need potentially to add a defensive tackle. I mean, they just signed Jordan Phillips from the practice squad. You got him, and you got Larry Ogunjobi, and you got Deion Walker, and that's the extent of the active roster, healthy defensive tackles right now. So the Bills might just need bodies at that spot beyond trying to fill in the talent for Ed Oliver. And if you spend assets on that, I don't know what you got left to add at receiver. A couple other things on defense here. I really liked Cole Bishop's game. You spotlighted on X a play he made on the tight end screen, which was on a cover zero blitz. The Bills brought 7, and the Panthers got it out with a receiver with 2 blockers in front. I would say that probably scores from the 10-yard line maybe 7 out of 10 times, and Cole Bishop did his job to force it back inside to Jordan Poyer for a stop, which prevented points. That was not the only play he made in this game. He had a couple very strong tackles. Look, the coverage stuff still is not there, and that's, I think, at least a chunk of it is because of the way the Bills play their safeties. But this, to me, was a step-up game for Cole Bishop.
It's the mundane. Can you make the mundane look regular and have to do it time and time again? That play on the goal line, he's repped that since he's been like 10 years old. We're like, hey, it's perimeter drill. It's 3 guys blocking, and there's a running back. Who's going to win? And the fact that he was able to do his 111, force it back inside, and also get off the block. Let's just not be a tackling dummy here and just say, hey, Jordan Poyer, you make the play. Be a football player and go make the play and get in on that as well. So I thought that was an encouraging thing. We've talked about it. Just make sure we have more consistency, build upon some of the things that we've done before, because that's what's going to separate him from being a player who maybe can reach his potential and a guy who you're frustrated with week in and week out.
How about Jordan Poyer quick? He did miss a tackle. There was a play where he got, absolutely turned around and some deep center field coverage that would have been a 7 if Joey Bosa didn't have a sack. But I thought for the most part, I don't want to compare him to Max Hairston, but in terms of a guy who's coming in who hasn't played in a long time, I thought he was passable. Granted, when there's 7 sacks and 3 turnovers, everybody's going to look good, but I thought it was okay.
Solid, and especially with the Bills asked of him, he was out there on 1st and 2nd down for the most part. We're not going to ask you to do some of the exotic stuff where we need our safeties to be athletic and do some of the stuff with disguise. Solid. And I think that if this is the way they have to go down the rest of the year until Taylor Rapp gets back, okay, it is what it is.
Before we close out this show, this will be the last time you and I do this before the NFL trade deadline. If you are Brandon Beane, and I don't want to ask for a player or a position, I want to take a look from a philosophy, because I just brought up the problem you have now with Ed Oliver being hurt and what you might need a defensive tackle. There might come a decision in that office at One Bills Drive about, if you're the Bills, do you try to augment what's been a problematic defense, I think more often than not, either at defensive tackle or in the secondary? Maybe if you don't feel like Max Harrison can be the starter, if you want to add a safety, Taylor Rapp's not going to come back at any time, or do you go ahead and press what you have on offense and say, look, we're going to go into the playoffs, and yeah, we might have to win games 40-37, but if we can find another piece on offense, most likely a receiver, that really opens things up, the way our running game is trucking and the fact that we have the reigning MVP at quarterback with a really good offensive line, 40-37 might be a viable strategy for us.
I'm going for the bigger go home in terms of wide receiver. Obviously, you heard the Brian Thomas Jr. report, so I'm not really too enthused by it. I think it's just a report at this point. But you need to go get a player who can slot everyone in their proper positions. We talked about it last year with Amari Cooper. That was the hope, right? He's your wide receiver 1. So you would ask Keon Coleman to be your wide receiver 3 or 4. You would ask Khalil Shakir to just be the underneath guy. But you just can't get any old receiver, because now you're stuck in the same position you are now. You got a bunch of wide receiver 2, 3s, and 4s, and if I'm a defensive coordinator, it doesn't change how I approach Josh Allen. So I think, listen, if you can go get an Olave, Brian Thomas Jr., guys of that ilk, you go do it. If not, you talk me out of the Rashid Shaheed thinking if it's a day 2-ish pick. But if you can get a guy who at least has some juice down the field for like a day 3 pick, I would do it. And because I wouldn't give up a long-term asset, like so first 2 days, but a round 4 through 7 pick for a guy who just can burn and go down the field. I think you owe that to Josh Allen.
I think it's going to be hard to really grab that wide receiver 1. And I agree. If you can do that, that's who you grab.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Beyond, let's take that off the table. I do wonder if maybe you go out and find a safety and a defensive tackle and try and make that defense so that there's not so many potential holes, and allow your guys that you have, your Bosa and your Rousseau and your linebackers when they're healthy, although the backups I think played pretty well in this game, to do what they do well without worrying about the fact that they're like the cartoon character trying to reach in for 7 holes on defense to help what everybody else is doing. Rashid Shaheed would be fun, but I think going defense in multiple spots might be the way to go. All right, that's going to do it for us this week. Remember, you can always watch Let's Talk Ball on Spotify and YouTube. You can also see it right here on Rochester First and on WIVB+. For Carl Jones, I'm Thad Brown. Thanks for watching Let's Talk Ball. We will see you again next week when we talk about the big one, the Bills and the Chiefs.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.